Hey guys, PansRace007 here, and to get back to the Mr. Surfacer versus Mr. Dissolve Putty debate, we are looking at the almost a finished product. The turret detail, the ejector pin marks getting filled. Both have had a chance to dry and set up, and we'll sand them down and see what we get. So basically, what I'll do is would come back with a coarse sanding stick and just basically sand this down and get it flush with the turret body or roof as it is, and we'll see how well the ejector pins have disappeared. Basically, you're going to do it pretty much like this as with any sanding, and instead of wasting your time watching me do this, we will go to elapsed time photography or the pause button, and we'll be back in a second. Alright, another thing you can do to speed the process just a little bit is I've got a chisel bit from an X-Acto blade, and you can kind of plane down the area. And since the blade is a little bit wider than the ejector pin mark, you can use the surrounding area as a leveler and make sure that you're not digging in too far to the ejector pin mark, and you can ensure that at least you have a sporting chance of having it flushed. And it works both on the Mr. Surfacer and the Mr. Dissolved to make sure that you have a nice clean level edge to level the playing field, as they say. And this is what you got going on. And then you can come back with a sanding stick, still using the coarse sanding stick. Of course, I'll come back and almost smooth it down with a fine sanding stick, and just to smooth everything out and get the scratches and whatnot off. And you can see, especially down here on this one, that you can just really shave off the excess and not really hurt the surface too much, as long as you're gentle with it and don't really dig into it. This blade is actually brand new, so I'm really being a little gentle with it as far as pressure applying it. And I'll come back with the coarse sanding stick, touch up the areas, plane it down to a smooth finish. And also another thing you'll notice is the Mr. Surfacer is slightly a rougher texture when it dries as opposed to the Mr. Dissolve, and you can really feel it when you run your hands over it. And you can feel this is a little bit smoother and flush than this side. Now, what I was talking about earlier with shrinkage, you really didn't see too much of it here in these spots, only because I put it on slightly thicker than normal than I would. So it actually kind of helped. These came out looking really good. And here's the weld bead. If you can see that, you can kind of feel, run your hand over it, you can feel the texture in it and see it. With this one over here, of course, you'd want to come back and sand off the excess. And then if you have a few scratches in the surface, of course, you can come back with a fine sanding stick and just buff it out, and you'll be good to go, ready for paint. And then depending on what brand of paint you use will depend on whether or not you prime it. I know Vallejo, it's a necessity to prime it, and with Tamiya, believe it or not, I've actually, shooting with Tamiya, have never primed the surface unless it was photo etch or a mixed media like resin. I could just shoot pretty much just straight with it. So there you go. There's a side-by-side comparison. You get a slight bit of shrinkage here on this particular knockout pin right there. Oops, sorry about that. Right there. And then you can see on this one where it was, where I used a wash at the hatch and washed it in to the surface, and it's sitting in there nice and neat and it looks pretty good. Here's a close-up, if it'll focus, on the weld bead, and then you can see the ejector pin marks are pretty much covered. Even though this is clear and you can see through it, running your hand across it, you can feel that it's filled, and it'll take paint and you won't even be able to see it after it's painted. So there you go. This particular one, you know, it seems like it's almost a 50-50 split between using Mr. Surfacer or Mr. Dissolve Putty as far as which one's better. Choice is yours, as they say, but for me, I particularly really like the Mr. Dissolve Putty, as it has the different properties to be smooth to the touch after it's filled, even sanded. These over here are really smooth, really didn't need to buff it out. I buffed it out for the surrounding area. Also the weld beads that are easy to accomplish with the Mr. Dissolve Putty, and the ability to wash it into an area